Hi everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be going over the March Once Upon a Book Club. This book subscription is encouraging you to read the book that they give you, as their trinkets are, one, described in the book, and then two, told not to open until you get to that part in the book. So when we open it, we're going to get our quote card. In the end, a fairy tale is nothing more than a sense of hope. We're also going to get our little booklet, which is going to have the book, discussions with the author, book club questions, and then this month we're going to have a recipe for Mexican hot chocolate. We also get a bookmark, which also has the same quote as the quote page. And then this month's book is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Choksi. She's written a couple other books. The one that I know is Gilded Wolves. I haven't read it, but I have it on my TBR. And then the inside page says, once upon a time, a man who believed in fairy tales married a beautiful, mysterious woman named Indigo Maxwell Cassindia. He was a scholar of myths. She was the heiress to a fortune. They exchanged gifts and stories and believed they would live happily ever after, and in exchange for her love, Indigo extracted a promise that her bridegroom would never pry into her past. But when Indigo learns that her estranged aunt is dying and the couple is forced to return to her childhood home, the House of Dreams, the bridegroom will soon find himself unable to resist. For within the crumbling manor's extravagant rooms, the musty hall lurks, a shadow of another girl, Azure, Indigo's dearest childhood friend, who suddenly disappeared. As the house slowly reveals his wife's secret, the bridegroom will be forced to choose between reality and fantasy, even if doing so threatens his marriage or his life. Our first box is going to be on page 7. It is a yellow box with blue flowers. Our next box is a larger one, going to be opened on page 58. It is paper wrapped with yellow flowers. The next one will be opened on page 175, a blue light box. And then the last and final trinket is on page 286. So I will see you after I have read up to page 7 to open the book, to open the next gift for this and tell you what's going on. Okay, so we are on page 7 of The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. Not much has happened in it yet, as it is page 7. But anyway, our main character, the bridegroom, has arrived at a hotel in search of a grimoire. And in the scene currently, he's at a bar waiting for Indigo to show up. And then our main character was finally presented with 2 glasses of drinks of the same color, one of which would fill his belly, but he would only tell lies, or he would be hunger forever, but he will be truthful, or something like that. Anyway, so we're thinking maybe a ring, maybe a drink, something like that, probably. In the past, the boxes that I've gotten, it's been really clear what it is. So this one's actually somewhat of a mystery, I think, on what it would be. So we've got page 7, and then in it, we have, oh cool, a whiskey or an ice ball chiller. So it is just a little cup with Once Upon a Book Club. You'd fill it with water, and it'd make circle ice for your whiskey glass. So that is page 7. I will return for page 58 and update you then. Okay, so we are now further into the book, a little bit past this because my dogs were acting crazy last night. So far, most of it has been told in the bridegroom's point of view. In this new chapter, we're in Azura's point of view, and it kind of will flip back and forth between their point of views for a while. At this point, there's been a lot of symbolism of hunger. There's also been the hints that he's going to break his vow. A lot of allusions to different fairy tales. I've been keeping track, and right now we're at like 15 different fairy tale allusions. And then there's also a very interesting thing going on with color. A lot of it is mostly blue and red, but we'll also get black and white in there every so often. And anytime a color is mentioned, it's very intricate. So anyway, we're on to the next package, which is on page 58. And the sentence that is describing what we're going to get is, from Azura's point of view, Indigo and I sat at the dining room table, half-heartedly piecing together a puzzle that she told me would become a door to the kingdom of mermaids if we finished it before midnight. So I'm assuming that we're going to get an easy-ish puzzle with a door or maybe a mermaid. Actually, it's a little bit heavier. Maybe 500 pieces? That's my guess. So we have first the box that it comes in, and it's happiness is like those places in fairy tales whose gates are guarded by dragons. We must fight in order to conquer it, by Alexander Dumas Pire. And then it looks like on the back we have letters on the back of it. So that's interesting. So just a quote puzzle. Okay, so we're back with page 175. At this point, we're in a two-timeline story. So we have the current timeline, which is the bridegroom arriving at the House of Dreams, which Indigo grew up in. And then we also have the past timeline of Indigo and Azura from when they were like 13 to when they graduate, essentially. And it's kind of going and telling you about how manipulative and controlling Indigo is. So like there have been a number of points where I've just been like, this bitch. Most notably is the passport scene. That just was rude to me. I don't know if I'm gonna keep that part in because I want to be a little spoiler free. So anyway, we're at the two timelines, and the bridegroom is going through the house, and he's also thinking about his brother that went missing, and all of a sudden his family was just like, oh no, we don't have a brother anymore. You never had a brother. But he can't not think about the brother that he totally had or maybe didn't have. So he's thinking that as he goes through and finds Indigo's secrets, he'll also find the secrets about his brother. And then in the past timeline, we're going through Azura's point of view about how she grew up with Indigo, basically to escape her own house, where her mother is infatuated and completely controlled by this one dude, Jupiter, who is also very creepy. Anyway, on our next gift on page 175, the sentence leading up to it is, in the bridegroom's perspective, I had the childish notion that if I couldn't see myself, then no one else could either. My hands were full of treasures, the jar with the one rattling tooth and the cassette tape. You're my favorite blue. Love, Lyric. Maybe a cassette tape? That'd be weird. It's probably gonna have the note. It'd be interesting if it was the tooth and a lock of hair. It is a mixtape kitchen sponge. And on it, it's upside down in the packaging here. but it has "You're my favorite blue" love lyric. So that's kind of cute. Little practical one. So yeah. We will return with page 268. Yeah. So we are now back with page 268. We are like 20 pages away from the end of it. We're basically at the end of it. We have had one of the timeline's climaxes, kind of, because we're about to have another one. I have already finished the book. I went to Easter, finished the book. We're pretending I didn't. So we've had one climax that has happened, and it's leading into the second. I wouldn't call it like a climax. We've had like a turning point just before the climax in Azur's point of view, and we are cusping to the climax in the bridegroom's point of view. So, for page 268, we are currently in Azur's point of view. So she has made a decision, and this is kind of like her last breath before she moves on with this decision. So the quote for this package is, "Normally I didn't wear any, but tonight I opened my hand for the slender glass vial and satin atomizer, wrapping myself in the thick scent of green apples." So likely perfume. Is it gonna smell of green apples? Is it gonna smell of honeysuckle? Is it even gonna be perfume? So we have a small vial of perfume here, and it says indigo green apple perfume. Okay. Didn't do that right. So it has like the barest hint of green apple. It's more of a fresh scent, I would say. It's not super strong, but it is nice and refreshing. It is nice and refreshing. I'm gonna get the B-roll of the things all together, and then we'll come back. And then we'll come back for a non-spoiler review and then a spoilery review of the book. So in the last tale of the Flower Bride, we follow these three characters as they go throughout their lives. First we have the present timeline, which is of the bridegroom returning with his wife Indigo to the House of Dreams, where she has not been since she was a teenager because her aunt Tati is dying. In this time, the bridegroom is also searching for his lost brother, who his parents have told him that he never had a brother and he never existed. But the bridegroom believes that he did have a brother because he has these very clear and vivid memories of him. And he believes that if he can unlock Indigo's secret, then he can also unlock the secret of his brother. In the previous timeline with Azur, we're going through her as she grows up, basically never living at her house and never wanting to be there because her mother is too infatuated with her husband, who is a very creepy guy. Her mother also says that her family has a curse on them in which they get tied up and trapped by other people. Indigo is a manipulative little bitch. And she kind of controls Azur's life in this. Throughout the book, it's very magical realism, maybe real magic. you're kind of second guessing yourself the entire time on whether or not the magic is real, because the characters definitely want magic to be real. Overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I think had the bridegroom been more of a character and less of a plot device, it would have been a lot better. But I also think that Azur's point of view was very strong. It was pretty easy to tell that this was Roshani Choksi's adult debut, as I felt her young adult section was very strong. Granted, her young adult section still dealt with very adult issues like sex, like perverted stepfathers, like other things as well. So it would still be on a more adultish side. However, I feel that she did fail a little bit with the bridegroom's point of view, as it was very stepped back. And I think that's really more of her trying to flip the fairy tale status on its head by making the bridegroom a very nonchalant character like most females are in other fairy tales, where they're never given a name and they really are just the plot device. I think his brother's story was a little tacked on, and I was never really interested in it, but Azur, I loved reading Azur's point of view and going through her growing up with this controlling and manipulative best friend that would refuse to let her go. And it was very interesting picking up on all of the pieces throughout the writing and connecting both point of views to kind of allow you to see how this book was going to end. This is a book that you definitely need to focus on while you read it. I don't think it's one that you could passively read or absentmindedly read, as there are a lot of flowery and flowing language that if you aren't fully paying attention to some things, you might miss what's going on or not be able to catch what's going to happen. However, there are other times when the writing does very much drive home the point of what it's trying to say. Overall, it was a very good book. I would definitely suggest it to people who like fairy tales, especially proper, grim, dark fairy tales, and not like the Disney ones, because this is a dark fairy tale, like a proper fairy tale. Alright, so now we're going to go into the spoilers of the book. If you want to read it on your own and you don't want any spoilers, we're just going to tell you to leave. Bye! So this book I kind of already covered pretty much all of the bridegroom's point of view, so we'll start with that, as it's very basic and boring. So the bridegroom basically immediately fell in love with Indigo from first sight or first sex. And then they went on and had this really weird relationship where they got married, and Indigo was so controlling that no one could be there or witness it, and the officiant, the orchestra, and the witness all wore blindfolds for their wedding. It was really weird. And she kind of like kept this mysterious, separate from everything else personality throughout the entire time. Present Indigo, honestly, doesn't have much of a character. She is just an ethereal being that the bridegroom is infatuated with and attracted to. He's very much like trapped in her orbit, is what I would say. And he, at the beginning of the book, is like, I won't break your vow, but almost like a third of the way in was just like, I'm gonna break your vow and I'm gonna figure out everything, because once I figure out everything, it will break the curse. And he ends up being right in the end about that, which is good, because it was such a stupid thing for her to be like, don't dig into my past. But I understood why it is what it is. In the author discussions that the Once Upon a Book Club sent to us, Roshani Choksi said that it was a retelling of Bluebeard, but gender swapped, which is why the characters Indigo and Azur were both blue names, and also why the bridegroom never got a name to begin with. Moving on to Azur's point of view, which I enjoyed a lot more, like I've already said. She goes through a time. So her mother is super into Jupiter, and she's also super jealous of Azur because Azure is one, young, and two, looks exactly like her, and it's very obvious that Jupiter is also kind of attracted to her. Throughout the book, with Azure's point of view, we go through Indigo manipulating her way into being Azure's only person, and then also manipulating their Aunt Tati to kind of give them whatever they want. So there are a few key moments that kind of tell you who Indigo is. One of them is when she invites their friend Puck, or invites a new girl, Puck, into their little group. She very much kind of mean girls it and tries to control her and is just like hazing the girl to try and be in the group. So it's like, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing. That very much caused Puck harm. And at the very end, she tells Puck to go underwater and hold her breath until she's told to stop. And the entire time, Azure is very, like, throughout the course of Puck being in their group, Azure is very mad that there is another person in their group and that Indigo is giving her time to this person. And then throughout the attempted drowning of Puck, Azure's just like, maybe we should call it off, all of this, because she is a little worried about, actually hurting Puck, unlike Indigo, who does not care. Eventually, Puck does come up, and Indigo is just like, oh, you didn't make it, goodbye. And then there's another scene that irked me a lot that I mentioned earlier, which was the passport scene. So essentially, they're older now, and close to graduating high school, and Azure has started to think about the outside world, outside of the House of Dreams and Indigo, that is. And she's thinking about college and traveling and how she's only ever seen one place, and it would be really cool to see other places. So they set up this trip for them to go to Paris. So Tati, Aunt Tati, Indigo, and Azure are all gonna go to Paris for like a week or two and like enjoy their time there. But when they are all packing up and ready to go, they arrive at the plane only to find that Azure's passport is no longer with the rest of the passports. So they just turn around, and Indigo has already planned this elaborate party that's ready for them when they get back to enjoy their time there. Indigo very much is like one, a manipulative little bitch, but also she's one of those like people, she would call herself effervescent, like the snail. She like doesn't want to be of this human world and swears that she's a fairy, and she has all of these rituals that would like attract fairies and let them know that she's part of their world, and she lives her life to the best of her ability to present as if she is a fairy. So while we're going through their point of view, they have this other world, which is essentially just a garden, but they hype up to be kind of like the fairy realm, and only the two of them are allowed to be in. As they're growing up, Indigo says that on their 18th birthday, or after they graduate high school or something like that, they will eventually become one. So this entire read through of the book, you're left debating, like, there's only one of them, and she's acting a little weird. And then there are these other instances littered throughout the book that will lead you to the twist, like the bridegroom always saying that his wife smells of honeysuckle and apple. And then there's the fact that that Azure and Indigo are constantly switching whenever big events come up. And then or in general, they're just the opposites of each other. So remember how I said color was a very big thing? So they are constantly dressing in opposite colors. Tati is said to only know the difference between the two of them as their kids because of the smell. She says that Indigo always smells like apples and Azure always smells like honeysuckle. Otherwise, they're seemingly impossible to tell the difference of. And this might be because they actually look really similar, or because they're around each other so often and connected so often that it's very hard for any person that doesn't know them, which is basically everyone, to tell them apart. We actually get this interesting interaction between a person both in the front of the book and at the end of the book, where they mistake Indigo for the wrong person in the beginning and Azure for Indigo in the end. So to get to the final twist of it, which I called after realizing that the magic wasn't actually magic and it was just magical realism. So we get to the final twist where the bridegroom finally finds out Indigo's secrets as he goes into the outer world himself and finds a glass casket with the body inside. It turns out Indigo's entire plan when they were growing up was to basically be a murder-suicide, where her and Azure would die and be laid in glass caskets, kind of like Snow White, to be forever preserved and move on out of the human world and into the other world. Azure, however, never, one, knew that this was the plan, and two, at the time was planning to leave Indigo. So Azure was coming into herself and starting to realize like stuff was not how she wanted it to be. And she gets the chance to reconnect with her mom when Jupiter leaves for 2 months to go take care of his dead mom. So Azure goes back to her mom and they actually start bonding and connecting. She learns how to drive and they're just like, we should escape. And all of this time, Azure's mom has been saving money up for her and was just like, I understand that you didn't have a good child life, and I also left my parents' house the moment I turned 18, so I set you up to do that if you wanted to do that. So they're getting ready to leave, and Azure has this check that her mom has made for her, or this bank account that her mom has made for her, and she is going to do Indigo's kind of last party. But Indigo can tell that something is wrong with Azure, so she eventually comes to Azure's house, which she has never done before, and basically drugs Azure and puts her in her mom's bed naked the night that Jupiter is supposed to come home. And then she waits in the closet and takes pictures. Jupiter, being the creep that he is, comes in, sees this teenage girl in his bed and just masturbates to her, which Indigo took pictures of, and Azure was drugged throughout the entire thing. So she doesn't even know what happened. She just is what's told to her. And Indigo breaks up the relationship between Azure and her mom by basically saying that Azure had been sleeping with Jupiter for years and that she had the picture proof and all of this. So kind of a bitch move. Anyway, after all of this, Azure agrees to go to their last graduation party and has planned and packed to leave right after the graduation party. She has a bus trip, she has a bus ticket out, and she's ready to make her own life and go her own way. When she follows Indigo to the outer world for the last time, and Indigo kind of gives her hand and slips as she tries to stab Azure before she stabs herself. So Indigo slips, falls, and cracks her head on the glass casket. Azure, in a panic, puts Indigo in the casket, kind of understands what was going on, and goes to tell Toddy. Oh, Toddy, by the way, Indigo fucking blinded because Toddy saw what was going on and was gonna try and help her. So Toddy is like crazy now and blinded because of Indigo. So when Azure goes to tell Toddy what happened, she had put on Indigo's perfume that night. So when she goes to tell Toddy, Toddy believes that she is Indigo, and Azure, stuck in her own misery, can't tell her that she is Azure, not Indigo. So Toddy just kind of agrees to like never speak of it and banishes her from the house. And then Azure essentially lives the rest of her life as Indigo. The bridegroom has picked up on the differences based off of his talks, his private talks with Toddy. We honestly never really see the bridegroom and Indigo / Azure interact with each other aside from their initial meeting and their sex scenes, which is why their relationship is very hard to understand and like kind of see, because
there isn't one there. It's just him super infatuated with this effervescent girl. Anyway, he's pieced together everything and sees that the girl in the casket has the wrong colored key on her neck. So he turns to his wife and goes, "Azure, I see you," and breaks the curse. And then they live happily ever after. So that's pretty much the whole book. I enjoyed reading through Azure's point of view, and I enjoyed going through that manipulative character and like kind of finding yourself through them. I understand why the bridegroom was written the way it was, but I still feel that he is the worst of it. So again, 4 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it to people who like fairy tales. And that's that. My thoughts on the box itself. I enjoyed the book that it gave, so automatically it's already worth it. However, I think it was very hit or miss with the items in there. So I enjoy the ball chiller, totally gonna use that, and I'll probably use the perfume every now and then when I go out. But the sponge is probably never gonna be used as a sponge. The sponge, I'm never gonna use it because I don't want to ruin it, so it's just gonna sit there collecting dust. I might use it as like an expo eraser though. So we'll see if it works really well with that. It feels like the material that would be good for a dry erase board. And then the puzzle, I'll probably put it together, maybe, and then call it a day. I am not the biggest puzzle person, and it isn't a very intriguing puzzle. I think if it had been a very magical door or a mermaid like they were kind of hinting at, and not just a quote, it would have been a lot better. But I also like the quote. So yeah, book 4 stars, box probably 2.5 or 3. I've had better boxes from them, and of course the packaging is always exquisite. Anyway, see you next time. So yeah.